Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Monday, July 6th. I'm Sarith Hawk. A Valley music teacher in the 1990s fell in love with Latin jazz. When he couldn't find sheet music to teach his students, he started a company to publish it himself.
And now there's an outlet, there's a vehicle, there's a platform where this music exists, that people can find this music and perform it.
More on this Madera-based company and the bands buying his music from around the world in just a moment.
Your news day doesn't have to end after Central Valley Daily. Check out KVPR's broadcast, where you'll get top headlines, in-depth analysis, and some fun pop culture coverage. Stream KVPR online at kvpr.org or through your smart speaker.
And now to our feature story. Peaches and oranges are not everything that comes out of the San Joaquin Valley. The region is home to a lot of talent and some surprising contributions to the world. Today, we're revisiting a story about one of those connections. It's all about Latin jazz sheet music and the publisher who helped build a mini empire right here in the Valley. This pioneer has helped make the work of many Latin jazz artists available to the world right from his home office in Madera. KVPR's Kerry Klein has this story and conversation with Elizabeth Arkalian.
Steve Alcala is a music teacher and trumpet player. He joined a mariachi band in high school, studied jazz in college, and in the 1980s became a high school music teacher. It was then that he heard something that changed his life.
Whoa, this is cool. I love this.
It was Latin jazz. Think salsa and American jazz and Afro-Caribbean rhythms all woven together, like in this piece by Eddie Palmieri.
I was thinking to myself, man, I think the kids would really like playing this stuff.
But there was a problem. He couldn't find the sheet music that would help his kids learn.
That's their textbook. Just like math, you have to have a textbook.
Pioneers who were performing Latin jazz typically weren't sharing their sheet music beyond their bands. That left students and musicians outside of major jazz scenes without an easy way to learn the music. So Alcala set out on a painstaking task.
I had to do all the transcribing myself from records I used to listen to.
He'd literally write down the musical arrangements he heard, note by note, sometimes for 10 or 15 different instruments.
And the kids really loved it.
So did other band leaders. They started asking him where he found this music, and that got him thinking.
There's a need here for that, so I'm going to go ahead and start a publishing company.
He started cold calling the biggest performers.
And then I give them my spiel about teaching Latin jazz at Roosevelt High School, and would I be able to get their arrangements from them.
The idea took off. Alcala named his company 3-2 Music. It's a nod to a common Afro-Caribbean rhythm.
Bum, bum, bum.
Now, Alcala publishes sheet music by more than 70 Latin jazz composers and pays them royalties.
Japan buys a lot of music from me. Germany loves Latin jazz. Austria. And there was one particular group that played in Iraq during the war.
Military bands, and especially school bands, are his biggest customers, including the Jazz Orchestra at Fresno State University. The band's director, Richard Lloyd Giddens Jr., was Alcala's student back in the 90s. He's now using that same sheet music he played with his students. He says before 3-2 Music, teaching Latin jazz was nearly impossible.
And now there's an outlet, there's a vehicle, there's a platform where this music exists, that people can find this music and perform it.
Giddens students, like Trevor Kabose, say they're grateful to have access to this genre.
Latin music, Afro-Cuban music, West African music has such a profound effect on my life and everything I do in music.
Composers appreciate 3-2 Music as well. One of the first to publish with the company was Oscar Hernandez. He's won 3 Grammys, and yet he says hearing students play his work is a thrill.
For me to see young people learning the music, man, that's where it all starts.
And Latin jazz experts say that by giving more students access to this music, Alcala and his business have helped popularize it around the world. For KVPR News, I'm Kerry Klein.
And Kerry joins me now to talk more about this Latin jazz. Hey, Kerry.
Hi, Liz.
Okay, my first question is, how did you discover this story?
Like so many stories in journalism, it was through a really roundabout way that I was just looking into some music stories here in the San Joaquin Valley earlier this year. And a lot of people that I spoke to kept pointing me to Steve Alcala. They just, out of the blue, just say, hey, have you spoken with Steve? He really has an outsized presence here in a lot of different ways, especially for his, I think he's left a very significant legacy as a music educator, music teacher. But then when I learned about this sheet music company, that just seemed especially unusual and unique, especially because he's one of the few in the world publishing this music. So my interest was really piqued.
Yeah, and he's right here in Madera. I feel like if someone wanted to play a piece by Mozart, they can find that sheet music almost anywhere they look. So can you talk more about why sheet music has been so hard to find specifically for Latin jazz?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I had to sort of chip away at this as well. I mean, there's a couple reasons. One is that it's a newer genre. I mean, it really came to the U.S. or evolved in the U.S., I should say, in the early 20th century. So it's still a century old, but, classical music has been around for centuries.
Sure.
But sheet music is intellectual property. So composers write it, even if they're performing it for audiences, the actual notes they write down, the composers, the performers, they have to agree to share their work in order to get it transcribed. People can transcribe music by ear, like Steve Alcala initially did, but if they want to try to sell that music, it's technically illegal if they don't have the permission of the composer, so there wasn't much of a market for it. Also, this music is pretty hard to transcribe. These are big bands. Like I said, 10, 15 instruments, sometimes more. You're going to have brass and woodwinds and piano and strings, and you'd really have to be skilled, extremely skilled, to be able to transcribe all of that by ear. So it's not easy to just jot down and then share it with people. Also, one source really told me that it's education that actually really prompts demand for sheet music. If you're teaching it in schools, that's when you really need this, which is what Steve was doing. And it's kind of a feedback loop. Once people start to want to teach it, that prompts composers to make their music more available, and then that makes teachers, that allows more teachers to teach it. And so this is kind of the beginning of that feedback loop.
That certainly makes sense if you think of anyone who's taken piano lessons and learned for Elise, or, it's these certain songs are sort of stepping stones in education. So that totally makes sense. Now, writing this music note by note, I imagine would take so long. So how much music has Steve Alcala published up to this point?
Yes, it really would take very, very long. So Steve only did it for a handful of pieces, when he began teaching, before he really did start looking for other solutions to create this company. And so at this point, he no longer does that. The composers, they send him their arrangements, the music that they have, and then he, will input it into his digital system if they haven't already, and then publish it that way, package it together, be able to send it out for all these multiple instruments. And so right now, he didn't have an exact number for me. He doesn't know, but it is hundreds of charts. So that's hundreds of individual pieces with all their instruments. And that's the work of more than 70 composers. And really,
wow.
And he's really developed relationships with some of the really classic Latin jazz icons, not just Eddie Palmieri, who I mentioned in the story, but Tito Puente, Poncho Sanchez, Oscar Hernandez, who I also mentioned in the story, more than 70 composers.
And how does his sheet music company work? Is this sort of mainly a business-to-business concept, like you mentioned, selling directly to teachers or educational institutions? Or can anyone pay for his sheet music that he's created?
Yeah, anybody can. Just look up 3-2 Music online. Anybody can buy the music. You, of course, have to understand music to be able to do anything with it. But I mean, schools, of course, are as big as customer. But no, it's available to anybody.
That was KVPR's Elizabeth Arcalian speaking with Kerry Klein about a Latin jazz sheet music pioneer who built his company from his home right here in the Valley. And that's today's show. If you like what you've been hearing, help us build some momentum by leaving a 5-star rating in your podcast app. Even better, share the podcast with a friend. We really appreciate it. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden, Elizabeth Arcalian, Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado, and KVPR, with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Zareth Hawk. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
Each story you hear on Planet Money starts with a question. What happens if we refund tariffs? Why are groceries so expensive? At NPR, we stand for your right to be curious, because the forces shaping our world can be hard to see. Follow NPR's Planet Money wherever you get your podcasts and start seeing how the economy really works.